There was once a metal so legendary that soldiers believed it could split lesser blades in half, slice a silk scarf in midair, and hold an edge through battles that shattered ordinary steel. It shimmered with flowing patterns like water frozen in motion, its surface alive with ripples that seemed almost organic. Kings sought it. Crusaders feared it. Traders carried it across continents. And then, without warning, the method for making it disappeared. This is the story of Damascus steel, the lost art that once produced some of the finest blades ever forged. The name Damascus steel comes from the ancient city of Damascus, a major trading hub of the medieval world. However, the steel itself was not originally invented there. Instead, it arrived in the Middle East through trade, most likely from India and Sri Lanka, in the form of small, high-carbon ingots known as wootz steel. By the time European crusaders encountered blades forged from this material during the Crusades of the 11th to 13th centuries, Damascus swords had already acquired a near-mythical reputation. Chroniclers described blades that could cut through armor, bend without breaking, and retain sharpness far longer than their European counterparts. While some of these stories were exaggerated, the underlying truth was undeniable. Damascus steel possessed a combination of strength, hardness, and flexibility that was extraordinarily advanced for its time. The distinctive surface pattern, often called a watering or ladder pattern, was not decorative etching. It was a visible record of the steel's internal structure. Those flowing lines were born from the microscopic arrangement of carbides inside the metal. The beauty was structural, not superficial. The foundation of Damascus steel was wootz steel, produced in southern India as early as 300 BCE. Archaeological evidence from Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka reveals sophisticated crucible steel production techniques that were centuries ahead of Europe. Unlike bloomery iron, which was produced in a solid spongy mass, wootz steel was made in sealed crucibles. Iron ore was combined with carbon sources such as wood chips or leaves, sealed inside clay containers, and heated to high temperatures. This allowed the iron to fully melt and absorb carbon evenly, producing a high-carbon steel ingot with exceptional purity. The process was controlled carefully. Impurities such as phosphorus and sulfur had to be minimized. Trace elements like vanadium, chromium, and molybdenum, present naturally in certain Indian ores, may have played a crucial role in forming the internal carbide structures that later defined Damascus blades. The ingots were then transported westward along trade routes that connected India to the Middle East. In cities like Damascus, master smiths forged these ingots into blades using carefully guarded techniques. Damascus steel's superiority was not mystical. It was metallurgical. Modern analysis, including research conducted in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, has shown that authentic Damascus blades contain networks of cementite, iron carbide, embedded within a softer ferrite matrix. This microstructure created a composite effect. The hard carbide regions provided cutting ability and edge retention, while the softer matrix prevented brittleness and catastrophic fracture. In essence, it was an early form of advanced materials engineering. The forging process was equally critical. If the temperature was too high, the carbide structure dissolved. If too low, the steel would crack. Smiths had to maintain precise heat control using charcoal furnaces and visual cues alone. The forging cycles were slow and deliberate, preserving the internal banding that later emerged as surface patterns. This was not pattern welding, a technique used in Europe that involved folding and layering different steels to create visible designs. Pattern welding produced attractive blades, but the patterns were superficial compared to the internal microstructure of true crucible Damascus steel. Damascus steel was not layered. It was internally engineered at the molecular level. By the 18th century, authentic Damascus steel began to vanish. The blades that emerged in the Middle East no longer possessed the same quality or distinctive watering patterns. Eventually, the technique was lost entirely. Why did it disappear? One theory suggests that the specific Indian or sources used to create wootz steel were exhausted or disrupted by geopolitical changes. Trade routes shifted. Empires rose and fell. The supply chain fractured. Another theory centers on industrialization. As European blast furnaces expanded and mass-produced steel became common, traditional crucible techniques lost economic viability. Artisanal knowledge, passed down orally from master to apprentice, was fragile. Once interrupted, it could not be easily reconstructed. When British colonial forces took control of parts of India, indigenous metallurgical industries were disrupted. Whether intentionally suppressed or simply displaced by industrial competition, the traditional knowledge network collapsed. By the mid-1800s, true Damascus steel was gone. In the 20th century, metallurgists and bladesmiths began attempting to rediscover the lost process. Among the most notable was Russian metallurgist Pavel Anosov in the 19th century, who conducted systematic experiments attempting to recreate crucible steel. Later, modern researchers such as John Verhoeven and bladesmith Al Pendray collaborated to replicate the internal carbide structures using controlled modern methods. Their research suggested that trace impurities and careful thermal cycling were essential to producing the characteristic patterns. The secret was not a single ingredient, but a combination of ore chemistry, carbon content, and forging technique. Today, many knives sold as Damascus are actually pattern-welded steel, created by folding and layering multiple types of steel. While beautiful and functional, they are not the same as historical crucible Damascus. A small number of modern smiths have succeeded in producing steels that closely resemble ancient wootz and microstructure, but even these reproductions rely on modern temperature measurement and laboratory analysis. The original smiths accomplished this without thermometers or microscopes. They worked by intuition, observation, and inherited memory. Recent microscopic analysis of surviving blades has revealed something even more intriguing. Some researchers have proposed that carbon nanotube-like structures may have formed naturally within the steel under certain forging conditions. While the extent and significance of this claim remain debated, it underscores how advanced this material truly was. Whether or not nanostructures were intentionally engineered, Damascus steel represents a level of material sophistication that challenges modern assumptions about ancient technology. This was not primitive metallurgy. It was optimized metallurgy. The flowing patterns were the visible signature of controlled carbon segregation. The blade's performance was the result of balancing hardness with ductility. It was an early example of composite materials engineering, achieved without modern chemistry or industrial precision. The story of Damascus steel is not simply about swords. It is about lost process knowledge. Modern industry excels at scaling production, but it often sacrifices artisanal nuance. The crucible steel tradition required deep familiarity with ore sources, charcoal types, furnace behavior, and forging rhythm. It required a lineage of embodied knowledge. When that chain broke, the technique vanished. Damascus steel reminds us that technological progress is not always linear. Civilizations can master complex processes and then lose them entirely. What survives in museums today are artifacts of a material culture that once pushed the boundaries of engineering. In a world increasingly reliant on digital abstraction, Damascus steel represents the opposite. It is tactile, empirical, and grounded in fire and carbon. Imagine holding a blade forged in the Middle East 800 years ago, its surface rippling like water, its edge honed to near invisibility. The smith who made it never wrote down the full recipe. He learned from someone who learned from someone else, tracing a chain that likely stretched back to ancient India. He understood heat by color. He judged carbon by sound. He preserved patterns by feel. Then, one day, that chain ended. What remains are fragments, museum specimens, metallurgical studies, modern reconstructions, And a lingering question: how many other technologies have we forgotten? Damascus steel stands as both a triumph and a warning. It demonstrates what pre-industrial societies were capable of achieving and how fragile technical knowledge can be when it exists outside formal documentation. The lost art of Damascus steel was not magic. It was disciplined craftsmanship built upon generations of accumulated insight. Its disappearance was not inevitable. It was historical. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. Because sometimes what we call progress is simply replacement. And sometimes what we replace is better than we realize. Damascus steel was more than a weapon. It was a material symphony of iron and carbon, forged in clay crucibles, carried across deserts, shaped in fire, and remembered in legend. The metal flowed like water. And then it was gone.